Welcome to everybody to Inside Boxing Weekly Live on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly Live is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. So if you want to bet the fights next weekend or Super Bowl 52, make sure you go to thegruelingtruth.net, click on the MyBookie.ag banner, bet the game up to a 50% cash back bonus up to $3,000. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now I want to welcome in my co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank everybody who's tuning in right now, listening to us talk some boxing. Let's get it going, guys.
All right, and my other co-host, it was a bad night for him since he's a West Virginia fan and they pooped their pants against Kentucky, but he's still here nonetheless, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Mike, it's been a long night of boxing with a West Virginia disaster thrown in. Was able to catch all the fights. Perfect interval for the West Virginia game, except for the fact that West Virginia laid an egg tonight. So I'm ready to talk some boxing.
All right, we're going to start off with what we just saw. And to tell you the truth, I mean, I was worried we wouldn't be able to do this show because about the fifth round, I was dozing off. It was so bad. But after a slow start, Karam comes out, starts using his jab. Harold Letterman had him winning a couple rounds, but Harold Letterman's a little out there sometimes. But Lucas Matthyse comes back, knocks him out in the 8th round. Devastating knockout, Jeremiah. But I don't care how devastating the knockout is. The only thing I came away from this is that Lucas Matthyse looks old.
Yeah, and I think John pointed this out on Twitter not long ago. It looked like Lucas Matthyse was swimming underwater. He didn't look sharp at all. His punches had more slack than they typically do. He was off balance a lot of times. There was a lack of sharpness just overall in what he was doing. You could just see that it looked like he was just kind of behind. His mind really wasn't reading things quickly. What I did notice, and maybe this would have been more beneficial to Lucas Matthyse had he been younger. And again, we all realize that he's 35 years old. But one thing that I did notice, and one thing I want to give him credit for, because he's not going to get a ton of credit for that performance, because the knockout or not, he was a 6-1 favorite over Karam, so it's really not that big of a deal. But what I noticed about Matthyse is that he'd been working on slipping the jab, parrying the jab. I could tell that his trainer recognized that was one of his shortcomings. So Lucas Matthyse, you could see that he was trying to do that. He was slipping sometimes. He was parrying a little bit. He was trying to come back with his own jab. But again, it just looked like he was old. He looked like he was slow, but he went out and got the job done. I mean, eventually, that's what I was waiting for. I was probably like both of you guys, where I was like, Jesus, this fight feels like it's carrying on forever. But then he finally landed a power punch, and he still got it.
Yeah, so I think you don't lose power, John, but the rest of the stuff, I don't see him competing with the guys that are the real champions at welterweight.
Oh, no, but you do even lose power, but it's the last thing to go. So he's lost about everything else. I still stick by my comment that he looked like he was fighting underwater. That's the look of a guy at the end of the line, but the power is the last thing to go. And the power was still there against Tawa Karam. And I think, let's face it, Lucas Matthyse in his prime was legitimately one of the top 5 punchers in boxing. So, when he hits Karam, who despite 38 fights, he's only fought in Thailand and once in Vietnam. Then he comes over here. He hasn't fought anybody. He was knocked down by a guy with 11 losses in his last fight. When he gets hit by Lucas Matthyse, even a 35-year-old Lucas Matthyse, where the power has not gone, people questioning. I saw some people on Twitter questioning the knockout. I'm not questioning the knockout. The guy was out. He wasn't great, but he was fighting to win before that. He got caught by a guy that's still heavy-handed. The only thing I could use to make myself feel better when this one ended was I thought Golden Boy and all the alphabet people who like alphabets are going to hype the fact that Lucas Matthyse has the WBA regular welterweight title. We're not going to stop him from hyping it.
Does that mean that he's like the backup champion?
Who knows what it means, Mike? But what I'm getting to is I thought, John Molina Jr. just had that absolute thrilling brawl with Red Catch. He's also a guy in his 30s who's a power puncher, power the last to go. You know, the one thing we'll have to get for John Molina Jr., and of course he was in a hellish war against Red Catch, but, you know, Matthyse had to huff and puff and blow Karam down finally. But we know when Matthyse and John Molina Jr. fought the first time, it was an absolute explosion. That was a fight of the year kind of fight. That Molina was allowed to appear on HBO by Al Heyman against Terrence Crawford, and that was a mismatch. Let's have Molina Jr. and Matthyse go at it again. If these guys are still going to be out there, instead of talking nonsense like Matthyse fighting Pacquiao and things like that, fights that are never going to happen because it's cross-promotional with Top Rank anyway, and Top Rank's got people on ESPN. Let's stop all that kind of nonsensical talk. And instead of having Golden Boy try to dig up a no-hoper, let's have something the fans can at least enjoy. If these two guys in their mid-30s who've got the power left, if they still want to do it, let's have them give us something the fans can get behind, because I can't see any other real purpose for Matthyse, except for the fact that, you know, you could put him in theory with somebody good, and you know, Molina's good, but I mean, somebody else good, and maybe he could land a lucky bomb at this point and look horrible along the way, but he could also take a beating and get blasted out of there at this point the way he looks. So instead of that, how about something like him and John Molina Jr. and give the fans at least something they can enjoy?
That's fine, and that would be a great fight. But my concern, Jeremiah, is everybody wants to see Thurman and Spence, but with the way the alphabets are now and the way these fighters want to keep these titles for some, I don't know what reason, I think what happens is this. I think you get Thurman against Vargas, and then I think you get Thurman against Porter towards the end of the year, and then I think you get Thurman against Matthyse at the start of next year.
Oh man, well, I hope not. I mean, you never know with boxing. I mean, you know, when it took Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather, you know, over half a decade to get together, you never really know what you can place a sure bet on anymore. You know, but again, I really hope that doesn't happen. I mean, Matthyse, he really doesn't belong against a top level guy. And you know, the WBA's been weird with that whole regular title anyways. First off, it's a piece of crap. Second off, if I'm not mistaken, they don't make mandatories for the regular title, but they do for the super title. So the regular title is, in essence, a glorified interim belt, but it's not an interim belt. They probably have an interim belt as well. So it's all kind of confusing. So I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be pressure to make that fight or not. It does seem – my guess is that if Thurman and Spence gets made, it probably will be well, I'm hoping it's like this year, of course. We're all hoping that. But if, you know, like Michael Montero's talked about this at length, if anybody follows his videos, and he's been on the show a number of times, and he does stuff for us here at The Grueling Truth. He has talked about the reason why guys like Thurman and Spence have only been fighting one time a year. And it's not always due to the fact that they don't want to fight. Sometimes it's just Al Heyman saying, hey, take the year off. And what they're doing is waiting until the early parts of the year so they can get the TV deals, get the TV money, and then put them in with one another. So if that is still holding true, then my guess is that Thurman and Spence would probably fight early in 2019. But again, I'm not hoping that, and I'm hoping Matthyse doesn't get any shot at all. I mean, I like Matthyse. I've been a fan of his for a long time, and but his best bet is just to make exciting fights at this point. In fact, I know it's a cross-promotional thing, but they should have thrown him in with a guy like Brandon Rios, or, you know, go get him some old washed-up welterweight like Andre Berto, you know, Victor Ortiz, Josecito Lopez, you know, John Molina Jr. would be a damn good fight. Mike Alvarado. I would like to see one of those guys. Somebody who's going to come to bang, you know, but it's going to be sloppy and hard hitting, and, you know, just something the fans can enjoy, because Matthyse is not going to handle some of the best guys in the division.
Yeah, but remember, they're going to feed Carlos Ocampo to Errol Spence in a couple months, it looks like.
Yeah, but I do think that I do think the Ocampo fight is. I think it's more of like a homecoming for Errol Spence. I think they're trying to build his brand in Texas, and I think I don't mind that idea per se. I mean, coming off Lamont Peterson, it's not like he's taking a real hard fight and then taking a stay busy fight. Kind of like Golovkin used to do when he was fighting 3-4 times a year, where he would try to get a top 10 guy, and then he would beat up a couple of top 20 guys, and then he would take on the best guy that he can get. I don't mind it so much, especially if Spence actually gets a top level welterweight at the end of this year. But I just don't think Matthyse fits into the mix.
Yeah, my concern here, John, is that Spence is not going to fight a top of the line welterweight before the end of this year.
I'm concerned with that, the way things have played out. I was not at all going into the year. I felt confident that he'd probably get Keith Thurman maybe in November or December of this year. And then in that case, if he was going to fight somebody like an Ocampo, I might give him a pass. But with the Thurman saying it's not going to happen this year, and I didn't think, and I was consistent about that before the fight, I did not think Lamont Peterson was a dangerous opponent at all for Errol Spence, and I think the odds reflected that. So as much as I like Errol Spence, and as much as Lamont Peterson has had a solid career and is a solid fighter, I don't think he really gets credit, so to speak, for taking on, a real dangerous opponent.
Yeah, Peterson's best years were behind him. It was his first fight against a legitimate welterweight. I mean, that's the only problem I have with the Ocampo fight, is that it's not really stepping up the competition. It's probably going down a level even. I would take the homecoming fight, like I said before, if it's on network TV.
Oh, well, Ocampo is much less dangerous than Lamont Peterson, make no mistake. So I think it's definitely a step down. But, Lamont Peterson was legitimately on the front. He was in top 10s, ranking 17 divisions, ring and transnational. And, in my original 8, he was on the cusp. So, when you're on the cusp of being rated, when you're only rating 8 divisions, you're a good fighter. But he wasn't quite in there for me. So, the way I like to look at it, I like to look at it old school there. I think it gives you a good picture of what the guy's really in with. And for me, somebody as talented as Errol Spence, who I have number 1 with the welterweight title vacant, to not fight somebody that would make the top 10 of the welterweight division if you're only ranking 8 divisions, that to me is Errol Spence not having a schedule that's suitable for his ability.
Well, and Ocampo's not even in the top 20, probably.
No, Ocampo is not in the top 10 of any legitimate rankings, which I would consider legitimate rankings to be transnational, which, Jeremiah's on the board, and the ring. People have some criticisms of the ring, but I still consider their rankings legitimate. I don't think the conflict has reared its head in their rankings. So I still look at those two, and Ocampo is not, he's not in any of those top 10. This, to me, is so simple for fans, especially when you have, of course, everything online nowadays. I mean, just get online and check the transnational and the ring ratings when somebody like Ocampo comes up. It's amazing to me that fans that are supposed to be knowledgeable, writers, commentators who are supposed to be knowledgeable, they simply don't do this. They simply just say, Ocampo is the IBF's number 1 contender. What does that mean? We know what kind of number 1 contenders the alphabet people put out there. They just told us Matthyse and Karam. They just told us Matthyse and Karam were fighting for a title. I mean, Karam fought a guy at his pro debut 2 fights ago. He fought a guy 11 losses in his last bout and get dropped. We were all understandably a suspect of Mathyse's inactivity, the way he looked done against Postal, that you just didn't know what would happen with Karam being maybe some kind of an X factor, just fighting over in Thailand. And, heck, the fight was not thrilling, but it was competitive up to the knockout. So that, in a sense, that held true. But, Karam, when you did see it in the end, he was just too much of a novice. It looked to me, if Matthyse didn't have the power he did, it looked to me like Karam was some kind of novice prospect that they were putting in there with putting it there with the old veteran to see if he could take the next step. In other words, that's not what the fight was about, but that was like how limited Karam was in terms of what he was bringing to the table. So the alphabets will just give you anything. I just don't know for the life of me why people reference them and talk about them like they've got some kind of authority and it means what their rankings are. Even for this quote-unquote mandatory stuff and regular belt, they never follow their own rules. Adonis Stevenson hasn't fought the number one WBC contender when they don't rank the other champions. Stevenson hasn't fought that man for years. So what do the rules mean? They don't mean anything. They make them up.
You get guys like Pablo Baez.
Right.
Yeah, and see, I think this. I think there's a very important thing.
Louis Sabara.
There's a very important thing that we have to come away from this show with, and that is this. From now on, one of us during every show has to figure out a way to work the name Pablo Baez into the show. And with the way sanctioning,
how about Taylor Karam?
No, I don't care about him. No, he's not Pablo Baez. His record's not at 500 yet. And see, the thing that got me,
he was 38. He was 38-0. That guy you saw tonight was 38-0.
So's Deontay Wilder.
Guys, hey, Deontay Wilder looks like Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali wouldn't look like, or Deontay Wilder wouldn't look like Muhammad Ali if he dressed up like him for Halloween with an Ali mask.
No, he's a poor man's Larry Holmes.
No, he's not.
Well,
he's a homeless man's Larry Holmes.
Poor man's Larry Holmes.
But compared to Karam.
A poor man's Larry Holmes would be Buster Douglas. Go ahead, Jeremiah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. But Karam does make Deontay Wilder look a lot better when you compare their records. But one thing I want to interject, too, is we're talking about the Thurman-Spence situation. I know it's one thing I want to give Matthyse credit for before I get to this. Matthyse has damn good power. Well, I got to give him that. I mean, John talked about how one time he was one of the 5 best punchers in the sport, and his power has diminished a bit because even though it's the last thing to go, what happens is your reflexes, and therefore your speed, reduce that power. But you can still see that he's a big banger because Karam looked huge in there. I mean, I remember when Matthyse was fighting at 140 pounds, and he fought. Remember when he starched Mike Dallas Jr. one round? If I'm not mistaken, he was 163 pounds going into that fight. So for me, Matthyse was always a real big 140 pounder, and I always thought 147 pounds was his natural weight class. Karam looked freaking huge in there, so I give him a little, credit for knocking out such a big guy. But in regards to the Spence situation, they were. I saw an interview with Sean Porter. And he was talking about the IBF, and he was like, oh, well, I'm not really ranked highly with the IBF. Well, who gives a crap if you're ranked highly with the IBF? That doesn't mean you can't fight Errol Spence. I mean, Lamont Peterson was some BS WBA trinket holder before he fought Errol Spence. So it was just an odd thing from Sean Porter because he seems like one of those guys who will fight anybody anywhere. Him fighting Kell Brook and Keith Thurman, I think, is indicative of that. But for him to kind of, weave his way out of that, was a bit odd to me.
Remember this, though, Jeremiah, real quick. Don't mean to interrupt you, but I am.
Yeah.
Porter, when he fought Thurman, that did really good ratings. And I would think this. I think that there's going to be a rematch of that fight around October or November. And I just think right now he makes more money fighting fighting Keith Thurman than he does Errol Spence.
Yeah, and maybe that's true. I just don't think a lot of us need to see the Matthyse Porter rematch. Thurman Porter rematch. I don't need to see it. I thought Thurman won clear enough to not warrant it. Just like we'll see the Santa Cruz Mars rematch. I mean, I just don't need to see that. But you're right. It did do good ratings. He will get a solid paycheck out of that. But I just don't see putting off the Spence fight in favor of that. But what I wanted to get at is if we don't get Thurman and we don't get we don't get Thurman and we don't get Porter for Spence late in the year, who do we get, John? Who do we get, Mike?
We get Garcia against Spence and we get Thurman against Porter. And I'm all right with that as long as by March or April we get Spence against, Thurman. Or whoever the two that win that fight or win between that is.
See, my ideal Errol Spence schedule, if he was going to have Peterson in January, would have been Peterson, get Garcia, around the late spring, early summer. I mean, the Peterson fight wasn't a tough fight for Spence. And then get Thurman at the end of the year. Now Thurman's taken himself out of it. I agree the question, and I agree what Jeremiah said. Sean Porter, he had tough fight with Keith Thurman. He seems to want that one again. I think, frankly, you can read in between the lines. All it's about is he thinks he's got a better chance against Thurman than he does Spence, which he's right.
See, I disagree with that. I think Sean Porter, from watching him fight, is not afraid of anybody, and I think it bothers him when he loses, and I think he wants the rematch. And, I mean, I don't know why we would think Sean Porter would be afraid of anybody, and I don't know why he would be afraid of Errol Spence. I mean, Spence is not a huge puncher. I mean, he's not like he can punch like Tommy Hearns. When you look at it,
I don't know about he looks like a welterweight Marvin Hagler right now. So
you're out of your mind.
I don't think
he couldn't knock out Lamont Peterson. I mean, Lamont Peterson got knocked out by a smaller Lucas Matthyse in 4 rounds.
Well, he got knocked out by Errol Spence, too, because the corner stopped his fight because he was on the way out of there. So, and that's credited in the scorebook.
8 rounds later, 3 years after he gets knocked out by Matthyse, and Matthyse put him on the ground and left him there.
Yeah, he did, but Errol Spence took him out too. So.
But, I mean, this drives me nuts that Errol Spence would be compared to Marvin Hagler now.
Well, he's got the look of a welterweight Marvin Hagler. Now, he doesn't have the accomplishments of a Marvin Hagler, but he's starting to have that look. I was looking at him a lot like comparable to a potential Sugar Ray Leonard type. Again, he doesn't have the accomplishments yet, but, I saw some other people saying, and I had to agree, the way he can bang with 2 hands, and he's an aggressive boxer who, has skill but will come after you to take you out and can hit you hard with both hands. That is a little bit reminiscent of a Marvin Hagler. And Sean Porter's a tough guy. I don't think Sean Porter's afraid of anybody when the money's right, but I think that he was already had a tough fight with Keith Thurman. I think he would rather, I agree with Jeremiah. I mean, I thought Thurman clearly won the fight, though it was a close fight. But I think Porter sizes up his chances as better against Keith Thurman in a rematch than he would against Errol Spence, and I think the odds makers would certainly reflect that.
That has no bearing with why Sean Porter wants to fight Keith Thurman, I don't think. 'Cause I know myself, if somebody beats me, I want to go with them again. I don't really care what the hell else is out there. I want to get my revenge. And I think with somebody that's very competitive, that would be the point.
Well, he's not chasing down Kell Brooks.
Well, there's no reason to, because Kell Brooks had his ass kicked since then. Twice.
Well, Kell Brook got the decision over him then.
Yeah, and Kell Brook, wait a second. It wasn't that he didn't chase him down, but it's the fact that he wanted to fight over here instead of over there, and Kell Brook didn't want to do that.
Well, Kell Brook fought him over here.
I know. And he wanted to take him over there. But it doesn't matter. I mean, I just think it's sad that anybody would question Sean Porter and whether he's afraid or not. I mean, I don't think there's too many boxers at that level who've ever been afraid.
You think Sean Porter wants Errol Spence right now? He's talking about IBF ratings.
All these guys are.
By the IBF.
Well, then why is Errol?
Why the heck
so what you're telling me is this. Errol Spence says he's the greatest fighter that ever lived. Or is he the greatest welterweight since Sugar Ray Leonard?
He potentially could be.
No, is he?
Well, if he's what I think he is, he might very well be, but we're going to find that out for certain in overtime, of course. But he may very well prove to be that.
Because I see a lot of people on, social media and everything making that claim already. I just wanted to know if you were one of them or not.
Well, I'm not in disagreement that is what track I see him on. I mean, I think it's okay to project. You still have to say, Well, I mean, obviously, I'm not arguing he has the resume of Marvin Hagler or the resume of Sugar Ray Leonard. That would not be a credible argument. But you can project. It doesn't mean you're always going to be right, but I don't think it's wrong to, as long as you're making an educated judgment. And I see that type of a potential guy the way he's headed, and I want to see him get opponents that are worthy of what I think is his ability. So he can shine and build that resume along a modern day version of those type of lines, which you have to really work hard to do, to me, because the guys don't fight as much. And I understand that with the health risks. And now you've got, I think people are starting to get more honest about it very recently, as you did talk about earlier, as Jeremiah talked about. He said Mike Montero was referring to it. It's about TV dates. There's only so many TV dates, and for these guys to get the money they want to get, it's going to have to be linked to TV money. So, once you get to the quote-unquote elite level, which I would loosely define as the legit top 10, probably in 17 divisions, need that TV money to make the kind of money they expect, so they're not going to be fighting that much. Why I say all that is you can't waste then appearances. I mean, to me, you can't waste appearances with Ocampo. That's where we're kind of going back to, in a weird way, the old days where, let's take an example. If this was 35 years ago and Errol Spence was going to fight 5 times this year, then we didn't care if he fought Ocampo once. He's not going to fight 5 times this year. I mean, I was hoping to get 3 out of him. And now when you start, yeah, he should get 3, but now you start wondering when you hear all this kind of stuff. I mean, we thought we were going to get Thurman Jesse Vargas, and apparently now Jesse Vargas is going to be too dangerous for the Keith Thurman return. So, things are not developing even in this era as quick a pace as you would like, because PBC has shown us some potential for doing these types of things with fights like Santa Cruz Morris on ESPN, Porter and Thurman on network TV, Thurman and Garcia on network TV. That was the kind of creativity you want to see, where these guys are having big fights with big free TV exposure. And then at least if you're going to fight 2 times a year, they're going to be 2 good ones. I think that's the idea of the way to go. But I think there's just a lot of problems keeping guys happy. I think behind the scenes, the guys, they are warriors, but they also have to make a living in a tough business. And if they can get paid for an easier fight, all these guys from Errol Spence on down, they're going to take it. So, that's where I think the fans and the commentators got to come in and say to the fighters, hey, we understand what risks you're taking. We want you paid a lot, but if you're going to be paid a lot to fight twice a year, you're going to have to fight somebody good. There can't be these kind of alphabet contender guys. And that's, to me, where the alphabet thing ultimately comes in, because that's the smoke for the promoters to fool people. That's why the alphabet belts and the alphabet rankings are always there. That's the cover for the easy paydays during the course of the year.
All right, next up, we had Jorge Linares proved his superiority against Versito Hesta during their 12-round, 135-pound, whatever title they fought for fight. Venezuela's Linares won 118-110, 118-110, 117, 111. Jeremiah, I thought it was a solid performance. But once again, I want to see Linares and Garcia.
Yeah, I've been a big Linares fan for years and years now. But it to me, the fight looked like a high quality sparring match. He came and he did his best, but he reminded me of he had kind of a sparring partner mentality, where I remember there's a part where Jorge Linares landed a stiff right hand, and he reached his glove out there to kind of tap him and say, oh, hey, good job, nice punch. That's not really the thing you want to see from a guy who's out there actually trying to win. And the thing about Linares too is he shows brilliance in flashes, but he's not consistent enough to be a great fighter. And it's a bit disappointing, because he's a guy who's looked fantastic, again, in spots in virtually every fight that he's ever been in. But it's just, you look at, and also he has defensive lapses that he doesn't need. I mean, he gets clipped from time to time. Oh, and surprisingly, I mean, this is one thing I don't see people talking about is he got clipped a good number of times against Guest, and Guest is not a bad puncher; he's a decent puncher, and he didn't really look all that phased. So maybe Linares has a better chin than some of us thought. Maybe it's mostly been his skin. I don't know, but yeah, it just kind of looked like a glorified sparring session. It wasn't really a fight that we needed, but Linares went out there and got the job done. Again, he looked really good in spots. It was just too repetitive, and it wasn't that exciting of a fight. I'm hoping that maybe Mikey Garcia will fight him next, or Vasil Lomachenko. I mean, after seeing these performances against Kroll and Kevin Mitchell, etc., I don't think Linares is on that level. I think Garcia and Lomachenko both beat him. But I'm hoping the fight happens. I mean, I've still got to acknowledge that I like Jorge Linares, and he is a talented guy. And he is arguably the top lightweight in the world. So, again, we got to see the fight. Let's get the best against the best. And that's what I want to see. I think that's all what we want to see. Because if I'm not mistaken, Linares is ranked number one, both from the transnational and from the ring. So, let's make it happen.
Well, the ring has the most champions.
Well, this is
right,
the thing.
Yeah. They got that after beating Krolla.
Number one,
yeah,
I don't even think we should talk about. I don't even think we should talk about ring ratings that aren't John's on the Grueling Truth.
Well, I have the title. I'm with Transnational on the lightweight, even ranking 8 divisions. I have the lightweight title as vacant, and I have Linares at number 3 in my original 8 ratings, behind Garcia at number 1 and Lomachenko at number 2. And this is a spot, Mike. Thanks for the segue there, because this is a spot where I really do like my own original 8 ratings, and anybody else that wants to do it over 8 divisions, go right ahead, because that's the way you should be doing it.
Yeah, and you can find John's original 8. Let me plug you a little bit. You can find his original 8 rankings on thegruelingtruth.net. Just hit the boxing section. You can just punch in original 8 ratings, and it'll come up. And they make a lot more sense than anything you see here, including Ring Magazine. And the thing about this fight, John, is I thought Hesse, the first 2 rounds, I thought he won. I thought he won both of them. And then it was like Linares kind of figured him out, and that's all Hesse had. He didn't have anything else he could do to deal with that. And Linares ran away and won the last 10 rounds of the fight. I would like to see Linares fight maybe Gervonta Davis, though, just because I'd like to see somebody knock that asshole out.
I don't know. Here's the thing, but I just didn't think Gesta brought much to the table. He's nowhere. He's not even. He wasn't even worthy of a mention in my original 8 ratings. Which, if you look at them, I have the top 10, and then I mention a lot of guys that I believe are reasonable threats to get in there.
Yeah, as Jeremiah said, he looked like a really good sparring partner.
Yeah, but here's where I think, when I was doing my last original 8 lightweight ratings, wrapping up the year 2017, and I looked at it, it kind of fits with, to me, what I saw tonight, which is this. Though I thought the lightweight division was getting better, but beyond Garcia and Lomachenko, it's really not. It hasn't made the development I had hoped, and I think that's reflected in tonight in this. I have Linares at number 3 in my original 8, behind Garcia and Lomachenko. And I saw a tweet from Nigel Collins, who, longtime boxing writer who I really respect, and I was glad to see him say it, because it's what I felt, and somebody whose opinion I respect like his, I was glad to see it. It was on Twitter right after Linares got the decision over Heste, and Nigel Collins said, let's face it, Linares is not on the level of Garcia and Lomachenko. I don't even think I need to see this. And I think he's right. I think we've been talking that, and I'd like to now actually end that talk.
Wait a second. If you end that talk, there's nothing else to talk about except for Garcia and Lomachenko. And they're going to have to fight best out of 7 to interest us.
Well, but that's the kind of matchup we don't want to see. But the problem is with TV and promotions, and that's where Linares comes in. And I do understand that. But now we've got this new factor, which it might not be all bad for boxing if they would put on good matches because of the exposure it gets. But you've now got this thing where you got the top-ranked guys are on ESPN, and ESPN's talking about ESPN pay-per-view. Why I say that is we don't know at this point. It's a mystery. Is there crossover potential now between ESPN top-ranked guys and HBO Golden Boy guys when HBO just sent Top Rank packing? No matter how Top Rank wants to spin it, it was HBO sent them packing because they weren't getting anything out of them, and they're not getting anything out of Golden Boy. And one thing I want to throw out tonight before I forget, Linares is Golden Boy, is this. I don't. This is circumstantial to me, but I don't have any problem saying it because it's my gut feeling what's going on. Top Rank got sent packing. Golden Boy's not giving HBO good fights. They're relying on them. This was a horrible card. Let's face it. If Golden Boy did not have Canelo Alvarez, would Golden Boy still be the provider of fights to HBO? I ask anybody. You got to ask yourself that. I think the answer is I don't think they would be. What else are they giving him? Lucas Matthyse? Jorge Linares against Gesta? Everybody who follows boxing that knew that this card wasn't good. And, what HBO, now I said the last 3 months of last year, what I liked, see what they were doing, they were taking some guys, they're working with Loeffler and K2 on some stuff. And then they were taking some people from main events. Then maybe they pair them off with somebody else. And then they were getting some better or at least more interesting fights, even if the fights didn't play out well on paper. They were at least getting a gold. They had Warren send Saunders over to fight Lemieux. Didn't end up being a good fight, but it was almost an even money matchup on paper. Now, I mentioned that because Lemieux was with Golden Boy, but that wasn't, Lemieux going against some stiff that Golden Boy, dug up for one of their cards. That was, basically a cross-promotional thing with Warren sending over Saunders, who had, appeared on Showtime in the U.S. before. So that was something different. And what I'm saying is I think HBO was getting the right idea that they've got to do something different when they got rid of Top Rank. And I'm going to say it, you look at stuff like tonight, there's no more time to be wasted. They've got to do something different in terms of relying on Golden Boy. And, Linares is good, but he's just not good.
He's not consistently good. He'll fight a couple rounds and you'll think this guy's a Hall of Famer. And then he'll fight a couple rounds where he makes you fall asleep.
I was getting groggy tonight.
Yeah, and you can't be a Lomachenko or a Garcia unless you are consistently good for the entire fight. And really, let's face it, probably consistently great. Now, I think that the only reason I want to see the fight is this. When I see Linares fight, I see that from time to time. There's nobody else out there that can fight either one of those two where you see that. And my thought is maybe he gets in there on that night and has the night of his life, and we get to see a good fight.
Yeah, the lightweight depth's not that good, so that's where you might need Linares in there anyway. But I just don't see it. I don't see him pulling it off against Garcia or Lomachenko.
Oh, I don't either. I don't think he's got a chance against either one of them. I just said I wanted to see it. Just because I think that settles who the lightweight champion is. That clears that up, and then that clears the way for Lomachenko to fight the winner, which I assume will be Garcia.
Right, yeah, that's what you want to see. If there's any reason to make it happen, it's got to be that. It's that you want the best fighting the best. And I think we should promote it in a way. I understand that, it's unlikely that Linares would come out against either one of those guys with a victory, but I want to see it happen because I think we need to promote this sort of divisional dominance more than this weight jumping and trinket cherry picking. And you see with Vasyl Lomachenko too. I'm a big fan of Lomachenko. I don't think anybody doubts that at all. But I don't like seeing him jump from 126 to 130 and then maybe to 135 because what they're saying is that he may fight Linares in his next fight, but what they're also saying is that he might fight Ray Beltran. I do not need to see Vasyl Lomachenko against a 30 what is Beltran now? 35, 36? I don't need to see him against a Beltran. I don't need to see that at all.
That's an excellent point. You're going to see that, Jeremiah, because Beltran's been set up for the WBO lightweight belt against a no-hoper, even though Beltran's 36. So
here we go.
Typical top-ranked Aram MO, and then all the all the foolish fans and commentators, because we're going to have to say it, let's face it, because this is the problem with boxing. People got to start rejecting this stuff. They're going to say, Lomachenko's fighting for he's fighting for a belt against Ray Beltran. He's got to take this fight. It's for the WBO belt. And then he's going to beat up a 36-year-old Beltran who's not going to have any hopes of catching him. And I like that Lomachenko's in the traditional division, so I support that. What we didn't need was the whole 130 thing. He should have stayed at 126, cleaned that up, and then gone to the 135.
Exactly. Yes, I agree. But then that sets it all up. It seems. I mean, Beltran wins, and then he gets Lomachenko. Lomachenko wins, and then plenty of fans could say, "Oh, well, he's a 3-division champion. He's never been a champion in any division." I like Lomachenko, and I think very, very well he could have cleaned up 126. 126, I don't give him such a hard time about because it was promotional issues. Because Al Heyman had all the top 126 pounders besides himself under his belt, besides Nicholas Walters, who decided to move up to 130. And Lomachenko did get that fight and did prove his worth there. So, he did overcome the best top rank featherweights, again, even if that was at 130 pounds. But it wasn't his fault that he couldn't get Frampton. It wasn't his fault that he couldn't get Santa Cruz. Gary Russell Jr., he did happen to get, and he did whip him in his third fight, so right. That was a good showing. That was an unfortunate aspect, and I think, we'll probably look back on that in years to come like, well, it's, why didn't he fight? A lot of people are going to say, well, why didn't they fight? They're just going to have to understand the intricacies of boxing, and this happens all the time. Again, it's unfortunate. At 130 pounds, there's not really a lot for Lomachenko there. And again, we don't really like the division itself, but if Linares and Garcia are going to get together, I don't need to see Vasyl Lomachenko go up to Ray Beltran and pick a trinket. I would rather him fight Berchelt, honestly.
Wait a second, though. What you're forgetting about Ray Beltran is this. To get to be able to fight him, he's got to beat a guy by the name of Paulus Moses, who is 40-3. And he's coming off a big TKO win over Sadi Mundi. He hasn't lost since 2015 when he lost to Malcolm Clausen. He is the WBO African lightweight champion, and this is not just a normal champion. He's defended the title 3 times. I mean, in those 3 fights, he's beaten guys with a combined 14 losses. But on the bright side, those guys have won like 40 fights. So, I mean, I think that you're really underselling this, and I think we could get Vasyl Lomachenko against Paulus Moses.
Yeah, I think.
And Moses is known as the hitman.
Isn't he 35 as well? He's like 35 as well.
He is 39.
Excuse me, 39. And it was something ridiculous like.
Yeah, and he's from Nambia. But once again, you're looking at a man that is the WBO African lightweight champion.
Well,
Top Rank's amazing. Top Rank's amazing, aren't they?
That's just awesome. I mean, does Top Rank even? I mean, does even a WBO rank this guy?
They do. Yeah, that's exactly why.
What they do? They rank him a week ago.
Well,
they ranked him when Top Rank wanted somebody to fight Beltran. That Beltran could beat for the WBO belt. Yeah, that's when they ranked him.
Yeah, they wanted to set one of their guys up with, one of their guys. I wonder if Lomachenko does not, because I've heard that Top Rank is on good terms with Berchelt's people, but then again, Berchelt has a fight lined up, so again, maybe they can't make that fight. So it'd be interesting to see which way they take Lomachenko. But Beltran, he doesn't have much of a shot. But if Lomachenko doesn't get the Beltran fight, I wonder if they would set Beltran up with a guy like Felix Verdejo, because I know they had that lined up where they were going to put Felix Verdejo in against Terry Flanagan, but then Verdejo got injured and kind of scrapped that whole thing. So, I kind of wonder which way that's going. But I don't need to see it. I mean, I actually don't mind Lomachenko moving up to 135. But again, picking a title, and then everybody calls him a 3-division champ. I can't get on board with that. And to Lomachenko's credit, I don't think he wants to. I think he wants the very best in the world. I give him credit because I don't think there's any doubt at all that he wants Mikey Garcia, that he wants Jorge Linares. But, to cherry pick, trinkets, before you get there, I don't know. And it also sucks for Mikey Garcia because if he decides to stay at 140 pounds after, the Lipinets fight, granted he wins, which I think most people will do, it'll just go down as a big historical miss because Lomachenko, I don't think, is physically big enough to fight at 140 pounds. I don't think that's a route he's going to take or should take. So if we miss Mikey Garcia versus Vasyl Lomachenko, that's going to be a big problem. And the unfortunate thing is people are not going to attribute that to too many titles and too many divisions like they should.
No, yeah, and I think we're going to miss that one. I think the best chance, it's not going to be with those two, but I think to Lomachenko and Mikey Garcia's credit, you just get that sense. And they are both very talented. I think they're both extremely confident guys. I think what you're going to get here, though, is there's rumors that Mikey Garcia is 170 pounds right now. I think he'll make the weight for Lipinets, and the odds did just come out on that fight, and he's even a bigger favorite than I expected. I think you're going to see if Mikey Garcia blows out Lipinets. I think Mikey Garcia is ambitious enough, even though he might start it at 140 for a fight or two with the Alphabet plastic. I think he's going to be going after the PBC welterweight guys, and he's going to put himself in that. And that is exciting. So I'd like to see him fight Lomachenko, but I think we are going to miss that one. And then what's left is, okay, so if Lomachenko beats Beltran, if Beltran should certainly take out this Flores guy, or Moses, it is a little dicey, though. Who does Lomachenko get? I don't know if they do the Linares fight or not. Would Top Rank want to do that, or they just want to have him defending the WBO plastic on ESPN? It looks like they're content to do that right now. I mean, they got Terrence Crawford going after a WBO Alphabet belt. This is the way Top Rank's going to do it, and if people want to buy in, I think it's the loss of boxing fans.
And they get too much credit.
Yeah,
Arum gets way too much credit for it.
Yeah, I don't like the way. Yeah, I just don't like the way the ESPN thing's got the exposure potential, but I don't like the way the fights are headed.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and we'll talk about what was the best fight of the day, which it wouldn't have taken a whole hell of a lot. You had Usyk beating Briedis majority decision. We had one official had it scored even, which is why that's what I had also. The other two had it 115, 113. So the good thing here was it was a good fight. It was not a great fight. The good thing about the fight to me, Jeremiah, was that it was a fight that was pretty much, devoid of any clinching or lulls in action. And while the thing that it missed, which is why it wasn't a great fight, even though I know a lot of people on social media were talking about how it was going to be the fight of the year and everything, was there was no really big drama. Nobody really got hurt. But it was a well-fought matchup between two guys that are at the top of their division, and these are the kind of fights that boxing needs, and that's what the World Boxing Super Series is bringing.
Yeah, and credit the judges as well. I think throughout this whole series, we haven't seen any shady scoring. So I got to give them credit for that. And also they implemented I don't know if you're aware, Mike, but they also implemented the fact that if it would have went to a draw, they would have had a fourth judge break the draw. So that was just another thing that I think they've done right. But I think this is a good fight. The cruiserweight division is not popular in America. And again, like I said before, I think it's an unfortunate thing that American, the Showtime, HBO, they didn't buy this. I would have much rather seen Usyk and Briedis versus Matthyse and Karam crap or Linares Gesta. What I've seen from the Super Series so far has been far and away better than what I've seen from most of these promotions. So it was a good fight. Essentially these were two top 5 cruiserweights. I think the cruiserweight division is a good division. I think Transnational has Briedis number 6, though they have Tony Bellew number 5, and Bellew's not a cruiserweight. I don't think he should be ranked anymore.
He's not better than Briedis either, I don't think.
No, I think Briedis would beat Bellew. I mean, Bellew had a fine performance against the African guy, but he to me he was never a top level guy. But it was a good fight. Again, like you said, it wasn't a great fight. There was a good number of power punches landed. Usyk decided to be aggressive. And I think that translated well into the fight. Their work rate was strong. That's what I was particularly fond of. Is they didn't look like they gassed that badly, even in the late rounds. I mean, the work rate was high, the skill level is pretty good, but I think there's good and bad to be taken from the fight. And it's that they made a fight of it. It's what you want to see as a fan. I think a lot of European fans are pumped up for this, and it builds towards the final. So if Gassiev and Dorticos, if they put on a good display, you're really going to get a lot of exposure for the final, and I think that's a really good thing, especially for a prize of $50 million, in a Muhammad Ali trophy. The bad thing to me is Usyk. His defense was not as sharp as it's been in some fights. When he decided to stay on his toes, he got caught too often. He didn't move as much as I would have liked to. One of the good things, however, that I think about Usyk is that he took a good number of clean right hands from Briedis, who is a good puncher, and I think that translates well if he decides to move up to heavyweight. So we know that he's not a chinny fighter. But besides that, it wasn't a great fight. I didn't see anything out of Usyk that tells me that he would hang with some of the best heavyweights in the world. I still like his chances in the WBSS final. I still think he's a favorite in my eyes, and I still think that he will do fine at heavyweight when he decides to do so. But I think if he's going to decide to move up to heavyweight, he's got to move more. He's got to be on his toes more because his power's not going to do it. He just has too much slack on his punches. He's not a big puncher. He looks pretty good when he unloads in combinations, but when he moves up and he's going to just have a harder time warding these big guys off, he's going to have to box more. But again, it was a good fight. It wasn't a great fight. I actually had the fight. I ended up watching a stream from the Ukraine, and I had the fight a little bit wider than a draw. I mean, I had it 7-5. I could have even seen it 8-4 in favor of Usyk. I thought he was a cleaner, sharper puncher. I thought he was the aggressor a lot of the time, and he just looked more confident. He looked like he was the ring general in there. But I'm looking forward to the Gassiev-Dorticos fight next week, and again, hoping that that's a big. That's a good fight, and then we'll have a good final.
Yeah, and the thing that stood out to me, John, when I watched the fight is I thought Briedis controlled the first half of the fight, but it looked like he really tired badly. I mean, he fought through it. He fought his heart out, but in the end, I think that's what got him, and the fact that if he would have just put more pressure on instead of sitting back as much as he did, I think he'd have won the fight.
I saw it a little more like Jeremiah did, Mike. There wasn't any doubt in my mind that Usyk won the fight. It's funny with the way things are in modern days. Yeah, I watched the Russian feed, so I don't speak Russian, so I didn't have any biased commentary, or it was just me deciding what I was watching there. And as I watched it go along on the Russian feed, I just thought Usyk's won this fight. The fight to me confirmed I didn't think it was a great fight at all. I was actually shocked on social media when I saw people saying great fight. Frankly, a lot of them were, British and European fans, and I'm going to have to pull a little bit of a devil's advocate finally and maybe do a little bit of the ugly American thing in some people's eyes. But, it reminded me of, I'll be the first to say that, human beings have gotten bigger. There's different training methods now. Obviously, the heavyweights are bigger than they were 50 years ago. So I can understand the argument for a cruiserweight division. I wouldn't be against it. But with that said, when I see fights like tonight, I thought it was an okay fight. I didn't even think it was a particularly good fight. I mean, was it better than what we saw on HBO? Yeah, it was better than what we saw on HBO. But when I see people talking about the horror that this wasn't purchased by HBO, and some people were saying Briedis was the number 2 cruiserweight in the world, the 2 best cruiserweights in the world, it showed me they didn't know, because nobody that does rankings. And for me, these guys are in the original 8 as heavyweights. Nobody's got Briedis ranked ahead of Gassiev. Gassiev and Usyk are Usyk's ranked first, consensus, Gassiev second. They're the top 2 cruiserweights in the world. Now, Gassiev's in the tournament. That's a good thing. But it's not Briedis. So, this was the semifinal. So, Usyk was a big favorite going in. I did not think that Briedis looked like a guy that wanted to lay it all on the line. He was putting some pressure on, but to me, that was typical of what you see, even though these are Eastern Europeans, in the European style, where, if you get an American who's more of a pressure fighter, the guy's going to be coming after you, looking to take you out. Briedis, like Jeremiah said, he showed with some of his knockouts. He knocked out Char, who's a heavyweight. He's not a great heavyweight, but he's a heavyweight. And he's got some pop. I saw him land a few decent body shots, but I saw a guy that didn't want to lay it all on the line and put the pressure on he needed to with his style. He's 6'1", Usyk's 6'3". Usyk's got the reach. He was putting some pressure on, but he wasn't really going to lay it all on the line and expose himself to getting hit by Usyk, even though Usyk does not appear to be that big of a puncher when his competition's increasing. I think Usyk, he's a boxer. You see that punching, that amateur style we complained about last week with some of the Americans that were starting to come up in that scoring system where you get scored points for the punches you landed that they've gotten rid of. I saw some of that, except that Usyk's not backing off as much as some of those guys like, say, Lara and Rigondeaux. But I think that could be a problem for him. And I'm reminded why I picked Gassiev going into this tournament. Because I can see when Usyk gets backed off by a puncher who's going to come after him, like a Gassiev or a Dorticos, because I like Gassiev a lot, but it's an almost even money fight with Dorticos, and I don't know if he gets by it, but I feel confident now that I think whoever wins out of those two, who are big punchers, and I think translate to heavyweight well, I think either of those guys, they won't be the favorite going in, but I'll take him over Usyk. But, in Usyk's defense, and I have him 6 in my original 8 heavyweight ratings. I don't apologize for that or change that. It's the weakness of the division. If Usyk was going to fight Joseph Parker tomorrow, I'd probably take Usyk by decision, looking at Parker against Andy Ruiz and Huey Fury. So let me give that perspective. It's meaningful in that sense, but this tournament for me is a mixed bag. It's a good idea. It looks like a good idea when you get to the end. When you're looking at the potential final or the semifinal, the semifinal matchup like Dorticos and Gassiev, and then the final with this, they're both real good. But let's look at the early round matchups. There were a lot of no-hopers in there, and in the super middleweight tournament. What great fights have we gotten out of these tournaments and upsets? Again, let me throw that out as devil's advocate. In the super middleweight tournament, we got Brahmer, who started as a favorite against Brandt, and then it flipped where Brandt was barely a favorite. He got decision over him. That's your big upset in these two tournaments so far out of all these fights. And again, out of the two tournaments, this Briedis and Usyk was your great fight so far in these two tournaments? I mean, the Dorticos knockout of Kucherchov was exciting, but so that was exciting. But great fights. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's not bad. The jury's still a little bit out. I mean, super middleweight's a division we don't need. So that one we don't need. I mean, you can argue for cruiserweight, but we don't need a super middleweight division. So for me, as a traditionalist, looking at it from the other side of the pond, so to speak, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, but the one good thing about it, even if you don't like the super middleweight division, by making this, you do get Groves and Eubank, and we do get a Final Four for the cruiserweights. It's probably at least 4 of the top 5 guys. So I think in the end that was good. Jeremiah, do you want to respond to anything you heard?
Yeah. Well, I want to say that what I'm hoping for is, it hasn't been a great tournament, and I agree with that. I mean, there have been some exciting fights. I mean, I have enjoyed watching, Chris Eubank Jr., even though I'm not a big fan of him. I have watched him operate. I mean, I think he's a little bit better than some people give him credit for, and he very well may go on to get the decision. So I understand John's criticism completely, but what I'm hoping for is that this tournament sets a precedent and maybe other people jump on board. So if you can continue this thing, this has the potential to blow up and make the sport better. I mean, if we could do this every year, I think you could bring in big betting money, right? I think if you can, in fact, you might be able to help eliminate some of the titles and whatnot if you could do this. If you could somehow get the promoters to work together for a large sum of money, make sure it's well worth everybody's time, and then throw this big tournament together, something like a boxing sweet, it wouldn't be a Sweet 16, obviously. It'd be like a Sweet 8 or something, right? So you'd have the guys in the top divisions all fighting one another at a particular time of the year. You'd have tons of betting money. I think it could be a big thing for the sport, and what I like about it is it's forward thinking. It's a change from the mundane that we've experienced for years and years in the sport. So I think it has a potential, again, to set a precedent for something much larger and something better for the sport. And I know Kurt Emhoff, who John and I are fairly familiar with right now. He's supposed to be writing an article about this, about just structuring the whole thing and getting these guys to work together for something like this. And I think it has the potential to make the sport better. Will it? I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, it's all set in Europe at the moment. But again, if the American promoters see that it makes big money, again, if you're seeing that the Germans and Richard Schaefer are working together and they can somehow create a prize of $50 million, and the American promoters, again, they can see that, and you see that it translates well financially. Maybe they'll jump on board. Maybe we can get that over here. Maybe. I don't know. I'm hoping so. I'm hoping that this can be a staple in boxing's diet, and again, the sport would be better.
Yeah, but you've had this before. You had the Super Six with the super middleweights with Ward, all those guys, Froch, Kessler, Abraham, and that was successful. And that didn't lead to anything.
That's true. It didn't lead to what we thought it might.
Hey, and remember this: the other thing before you get to your point is the fact that the fights that were in this country didn't do that well, but the fights in Europe, Great Britain, wherever, all did well.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason is because there was a good number of European fighters involved, but. The Super Six, though it wasn't, it didn't lead to a whole lot. They didn't really do anything with the result itself. There's potential there for Sauerland and Schaefer to do something. I mean, again, I understand how there's a different, but we still think of that today. That Super Six tournament at 168, that's still something that plays in our minds today. And it's a format I think we appreciate as sports fans. So, of course, there's potential that it will lead nowhere. But I'm hoping that Richard Schaefer, who was formerly a Swiss banker, I'm hoping that, again, he has the foresight. He's one of the few guys that I've appreciated in the sport. I'm hoping that they have the foresight to keep this going, keep the ball rolling, because so far it's been a success, at least in Europe. So, again, there's potential there. I'm not saying it's going to succeed, but again, I'm just saying that there's potential there.
All right. I think we're going to wrap it up now. I'm getting tired, Jeremiah. How about you?
I'm tired. I got a big day tomorrow.
And then I know that John, he's just disappointed about the whole day in general.
Yeah, it was kind of a disappointing sports day in general. And one, and I'm gonna let us all go. It has, but one point I missed on the cruiserweight that I just want to say before we go is, I think the problem with it, even though there's not really much of an argument nowadays that we might need that division with how big the heavyweights have got. Whenever there's a really, really good cruiserweight, heavyweight's been the marquee division. It always will be, and a really good cruiserweight's always able to fight at heavyweight. So, in other words, your thoughts immediately turn to the marquee division, and I don't think there's necessarily something wrong with that. In other words, let's say I was wrong and Usyk does win this thing and he is the guy. If he's really that good, he's going to be able to fight as a heavyweight, and so you want to see that. So, in other words, you don't want to see this and then see, I don't at least, 10 cruiserweight alphabet defenses coming off this. I mean,
I'll tell you this. We saw it with Chris Bird. I mean, an athletic cruiserweight at 205, 210 pounds is going to be more skilled than Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen it. That's the thing. You have seen guys that are able to do it, and that's why it's not this impossible feat that a lot of fans want to make out. And again, I think maybe the Americans look at that more, and that's why. But let's face it, the cruiserweight division's never been interesting, particularly to Americans, outside of an Evander Holyfield stopover, and he ended up being lineal heavyweight champion of the world.
Yeah, he had no problem fighting at heavyweight. Michael Moore also was a guy that moved up successfully.
Well, and Moore
if you look, you look in the past, hell, Rocky Marciano was under 200 pounds. Joe Louis was around 200 pounds. Yeah, Michael Spinks. But let's face it, Michael Spinks won because Larry Holmes was old.
Thomas Adamic. I mean, he didn't
Thomas
win the title, but he was a top 10 heavyweight. He started at light heavyweight, fought at cruiser.
Well, Steve Cunningham dropped Tyson Fury.
Steve Cunningham knocked down Fury. He dropped Fury.
Well, yeah, and not only that, you look at Joseph Parker's performance against Huey Fury, who isn't. I mean, Fury's a good boxer, but I would favor Usyk, certainly in terms of skills, over Huey Fury if they were to fight, in 3 months or so, or however long it took to get a training camp. I mean, and you look at Parker really should have gotten a close win over Huey Fury, not a wide decision like he did. So, yeah, you look at Joseph Parker, who's legitimately a top 5 guy, and you see that Usyk is better than Huey Fury. Yeah, I think that, Usyk could just be fine. I mean, yeah, maybe guys like, Anthony Joshua will be a bit too big. But I think if Usyk can, granted he wins the tournament, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but granted he wins the tournament and he can, he can learn to box a little bit more, because I think he looks a little bit better when he boxes. I think he can give the best of the best a tough go. Of course, I'm not saying that he wins, but as I said on social media, even a Chris Bird type at this moment could be a pretty damn good heavyweight and probably a top 3 guy.
Yeah, and I think the big thing with Usyk, Dorticos, Gasayev, Briedis, any of these guys, the key when you move up is how you put the weight on. I mean, we saw it. Michael Spinks did it the right way. Evander Holyfield had plenty of steroids to help him out. So those guys got to the weight, and they were just as strong as they were before. I mean, Michael Moore still had knockout power when he became a heavyweight. And I think the key is not to get too big. But I think Usyk, talent-wise, is better than probably anybody I've seen in the heavyweight division. But that doesn't take a whole hell of a lot. So I think if he fills out, and you're looking at 2 years from now, I think he could be 210, 215 comfortably.
But I think Gassiev will be the guy. I think it's going to be Gassiev.
I think either one of them could. I mean, right now, I would put all 4 of these cruiserweights in at least 7 through 10 in the top 10 in the heavyweight division.
Well, that's basically what I've got 6 right in the 6 through. I've got 3 of them in there. I've got Usyk, Gassiev, and then I got Dorticos popped in at number 10 in my latest rankings for the first time.
Well, I think from what I saw today, you could throw Briedis in at number 10. That's how bad the heavyweights are.
He certainly, I mean, he'd have a chance against a Dillian White, certainly.
Yeah, or Tony Bellew.
Oh, he beat the hell out of Tony Bellew. Let's face it, Tony Bellew. Tony Bellew's highlight of his career is going to be those first 4 or 5 rounds against David Haye. If David Haye doesn't get hurt, David Haye was going to knock his ass out. And if they do fight in a rematch, David Haye's going to knock his ass out.
Mike, I think the highlight of his career might have been his appearance in Creed as that guy in Creed. So,
but he lost then too.
Than I would have. No, he won a split decision.
Oh, was it? Hell, I don't even remember. But that was just because they fought in his home country.
That's right. He fought in his home country and he got a split decision.
Yeah, that they were trying to make it like Rocky 1, so it had to be a split decision. But, I mean, overall, I think the heavyweight division is trash. And I know I give John a lot of crap about Deontay Wilder because I think he sucks. And I don't think Anthony Joshua is much better. So just watch out for Daniel Dubois.
I saw faith in Wilder. But, Wilder is in his early 30s
There's no reason.
now. It's got to he needs to get that Joshua
He's
fight.
protected for a reason. He's protected for a reason.
He was signed to fight Povetkin and Ortiz.
Yeah, he's protected for a reason. So we're talking about 40-year-old men. I mean, he's protected for a reason, and they got the hell. He never even showed up to Russia for that fight, did he?
No, because Povetkin tested positive for.
Yeah, but my point is this: he tested positive 4 or 5 days before the fight. Wilder wasn't even there at that point.
Well, Wilder was in England training, so.
Yeah, but it looks like you would be in Russia 4 or 5 days before the fight. I'm just saying, I think a lot of shady shit goes on in boxing, and I think shady shit goes on when you've got a Wilder and a Joshua and how much money is tied with those guys. It's going to be really hard to win a decision against either one, I can tell you that.
Well, I just think Wilder needs to get that fight soon. He's actually in danger of getting a little bit too old, believe it or not.
No, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. That's an excuse. Because, as soon as he gets his ass knocked out, you're going to say, well, I guess he was too old. This is the thing. There's no wear and tear on a man. It's 38-0 against guys that are barely alive.
Yeah, but it's experience. I'd pick him over Joshua this year, but he needs to get that fight.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any chance he's ever going to beat any heavyweight that's any good. Jeremiah, any final thoughts?
Any final thoughts? Well, speaking of shady stuff in boxing, I suppose I'll kind of leave this as my final word. And I noticed this when I was coming across my sorry here. I noticed when I was browsing through my feed, my social media feed, I noticed somebody had posted this, and so I had to share it, because I'm, when it comes to corruption in boxing and reforming the sport, I'm big on that kind of stuff. But what I learned is the AIBA, big
oh, yeah.
amateur, big amateur. So they promoted what a boxing official described as what United States authorities have described as one of Uzbekistan's leading criminals. Apparently, he's big in the heroin trade. He now got a promotion, I believe, as the VP of the AIBA. And it shows that the AIBA are taking their reform seriously.
Well, the thing is this. If he wouldn't have got a job at the AIBA, the only other place he could have worked would have been United States Congress.
Anyway, I'm sure he probably does some deals with all these guys. He's probably
well, I'm sure he is. Hell. But, all right, John, I'm going to give you an opportunity for a last word, and it has to be less than a minute.
Okay, that's going to be tough. But
I know, but I want to go to bed, John.
Odds have been posted on Wilder Ortiz, and Wilder is the favorite.
So?
That's my final word for the night.
How big?
I believe it was a minus 250. I believe
that's not a very big
favorite. Or minus 350. Not a huge favorite, no.
Well, I mean, Ortiz is like 72 years old because on Fridays every once in a while I sub in and bowl in an old man's bowling league, and he was there this week.
He's officially 38, so.
Sure he is. There's nobody officially anything from Cuba. He's somewhere between 35 and 78.
But if it weren't for the if it weren't for the positive PED test, everybody would have had him no worse than number 3 in the world. So,
well, we'll see if they fight.
I don't like that part of it. Frankly, I like this fight before then. Wilder picking it. It's always dangerous. I always picked Wilder in it. I still pick Wilder, but I thought it was smart before. Now, to me, it's just kind of tainted with Ortiz with the double PED test, to me. And I would have, even though there's nobody out there, I'll say it, I would have just preferred them to go in some different direction at this point. Now, to me, it's kind of like a fight with a guy that Ortiz, he's still dangerous because he's got power, and I just don't know if you get the gains by beating him that you would have gotten, say, 6 months ago.
Well, I think they're going to have a hard time selling any tickets for that fight, and it's going to make it really hard when it comes time to negotiate a Joshua Wilder fight in the split between the two of them.
Yeah, I mean, Wilder, I think they know that, Wilder's going to have to take a lesser end of the split, but they're trying to hold their negotiating position. I think that my opinion is, and I believe this strongly, is, and the odds makers, when you look at theoretical fights and fights that end up getting signed, they show this. The fans, a lot of them just don't want to accept it. Eddie Hearn does not want to risk Anthony Joshua against Deontay Wilder now. I don't think he thinks he's necessarily going to lose.
It's a waste of time because nobody cares. Nobody cares except people in London. Nobody cares about Deontay Wilder. Madison Square Garden won't sell more than 10 or 12,000 tickets for him and Luis Ortiz.
But Wilder would still be the biggest. He would still be the biggest fight for Joshua, except for maybe Fury. If they just got that fight maybe immediately before Fury comes back looking bad.
Yeah, but there's no fight that's going to pay him any more money. I mean, you got to build Wilder up. Wilder's got to beat somebody. If Wilder blows out Ortiz, then maybe.
Everybody's got Wilder number 2. He still gets talked about a lot. Let's face it.
Not outside, but to make the fight huge. When Holmes fought Cooney, everybody cared. When Wilder fights Joshua, everybody in England and Europe will care, and boxing fans in America will care. That's the difference.
It's still the biggest heavyweight matchup that can be made. Hearn does not want it. I think Hearn believes Joshua can beat Wilder, but he thinks that Wilder's got the best chance of beating Joshua, and he doesn't want that right now, and I think that's what's holding up the fight.
I think he's trying to make as much money as he can, and there's going to be 70,000 people jammed in to watch him fight Joshua, or to fight Joseph Parker.
I think that's exactly what he's doing, but I don't think he's done with that. I don't think Wilder will be next. I mean, Povetkin's coming over to fight in the UK for a reason. I mean, that's just not some coincidental thing that all of a sudden Povetkin's showing up to fight in the UK. I think that they're looking at it and saying, Povetkin's 38 years old now, and we can keep him off of PEDs over here and keep him out of fighting in Russia. He might be the equivalent of when it was a good spot for, Wilder to select Ortiz. So I think, I wouldn't be shocked if after Joshua knocks out Joseph Parker, that it's Alexander Povetkin.
I would love that. That's fine with me. I would love that. Povetkin can fight.
But imagine if Joshua fought 3 times this year and he beat Joseph Parker, he beat Alexander Povetkin, and then he beat Tyson Fury. I actually don't think that's a half bad marketing strategy going into a Wilder fight. No, because that's 3 nice.
I think that is the marketing strategy. It's just that Fury might be next year. But I think that is the marketing strategy.
That's perfect. That makes you the most money possible. It makes him as much as possibly he couldn't get any bigger than that after that. He beats those 3 in a row and finishes it off at the end of next year, the middle of next year by knocking out Wilder. Come on, that's gold.
Yeah,
well, I think that's the way Hearn. I think that's the way Hearn looks at it. But I think Wilder, age-wise, needs to get that fight soon.
But see, this is the thing. If I'm Hearn, I only care about what puts money in me and Anthony Joshua's pocket.
I agree, and I think that's where the fans and the commentators come in. That's why I always talk.
Well, how about this? Why not during the same time, while he's fighting the 3 biggest heavyweights he could find, what if Wilder was to beat Ortiz, and then he comes back and fights Jarrell Big Baby Miller, and then maybe beats the winner of the cruiserweight division? Then you have a bigger fight.
Miller's on HBO, but I think that's what Wilder will have no choice but to do, is that if Hearn, which I think Hearn's going to take that strategy, then, Heyman and Wilder are going to have to figure out, what's our best strategy in the interim before we can get Joshua in there. And, it's going to be somewhat interesting to see what they do, because as we all know, there's not a lot of heavyweights out there.
Okay, so real quick, this is what I think is going to happen. So I think if Wilder gets by Ortiz, which I think he probably will, I think that Wilder will actually be lined up for Dillian White before 2019. So I think maybe Parker or Joshua fights 3 times this year, and if he did beat Parker, he did beat Povetkin, and he did beat Fury, that'd be a hell of a resume for a recent heavyweight. I mean, because it's not often that we see guys at that level fight 3 times, and not only that, fight 3 times against guys who are top 5 heavyweights. But I think, again, if Wilder beats Ortiz, I think he's getting Dillian White. in England, and then I think you'll see the matchup between Wilder and Joshua early next year. And I actually think that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's a badass fight then.
I think this part I do agree with heavyweights. Anything can happen, and I would apply this to Wilder and Joshua, even though I think they're the best two heavyweights in the world right now. Something can happen. A bomb can be landed. It is heavyweight, and then the whole thing can get upset.
So, and then they'll still fight. It
Yeah,
doesn't
as long
matter.
as we get
See,
the,
this is the
as
thing.
long as we get the best versus
right now,
best.
yeah, as long as you get the best versus the best. John, you're one of them that says, I get tired because these fighters are worried about, losing a fight. To me, losing a fight is no big deal, especially if you're losing it while taking a risk at somebody. So maybe in the 8th round, Luis Ortiz starches Deontay Wilder. And then Wilder comes back 4 months later and knocks Ortiz out viciously in the first round. Wilder then becomes much bigger than he ever would have if he'd have just beat him once.
Mike, you're making things much more complicated than they need to be. We have two guys with Showtime TV deals.
But Deontay Wilder is not the second best heavyweight in the world.
No TV blocking them. They're both. Everybody's got them both ranked as the 1 and 2 heavyweights. Everybody that's got their head on straight. So,
well, I don't have my head on straight then. I'm a fucking idiot, right? Just because I see a man who has never beaten anybody, who has been protected his entire career, who can't take a punch. I mean, the video, what was that guy's name that put him on his ass and you can't even find it on YouTube now, Jeremiah? The guy was like 17-20, and he knocked him down. Wilder knocks him out in the 4th round of like his 12th or 13th fight, but nobody ever talks about it anymore. He can't take a punch. He's Michael Grant without the skill.
I've got him ranked 1-2. Transnational's got him ranked 1-2. The Ring's got him ranked 1-2.
I don't give a shit. It doesn't mean anything to me because I don't care what anybody else thinks because I take the eye test. That's what you always tell us about, the eye test. And I don't know how I could rank somebody as the second best heavyweight in the world when he is overprotected. I mean, Jerry Cooney, people rip on Jerry Cooney. Jerry Cooney fought 10 times the competition this guy did. I mean, Deontay Wilder has beaten nobody. He is protected because he can't take a punch. That's why they don't put him in against anybody. That's why he'll fight Luis Ortiz because Luis Ortiz is 44, 45 years old, if not older. They're not going to put him in to test him against anybody because they're going to use him to cash out. And, hey, maybe they'll get lucky. He'll land a punch and they can cash out again after that. But I can tell you this. I don't give a shit what an odds maker says. I really don't. Because everybody I talk to that has seen him train, I hear all these stories about how he gets knocked down all the time. I've talked to very few former heavyweights or any boxers today that when I bring up Deontay Wilder, I say, oh, damn, he's really good. Because he's not. Now, this is the thing. You can say odds makers say this, but how many times have we seen odds makers say stuff that was wrong? Super Bowl III, they favored the Jets were 18-point underdogs, and the Jets dominated and damn near shut out the Colts.
Sure, they're always going to be wrong, but they're going to be wrong less than everybody else. And they had him as a slight favorite over Povetkin in Russia when that fight was getting ready to go, and they've got him favored over Ortiz.
Yeah, because he is a myth. He's a myth. Mike Tyson was favored like 12-1 over Evander Holyfield. But if they would have known anything about boxing, John, that wouldn't have happened. Why was he favored 10-1 or 12-1 or 11-1? Because
21. He was favored 21-1 over him.
Okay, it was 21-1 now because 11-1 when I watched it today. But
no,
why would they miss that fight? Because anybody that knew anything about boxing knew Mike Tyson could have never beaten Evander Holyfield.
No, Evander Holyfield had looked terrible against Bobby Ches in Madison Square Garden. I was at that fight. And, people thought that Holyfield was done. That's why. And that's why Don King thought Holyfield was done. That's why Don King had Mike Tyson fight.
Well, the odds makers were wrong. The odds makers were way wrong because Evander Holyfield, no matter when he fights him, beats him.
Sure, they were wrong. But if you bet all the time thinking the odds makers are always going to be wrong.
Why would I think that? I just think this.
They're going to be right more than you are.
Okay, they're going to be right more than I am. They kick my ass all the time. That's why to mybookie.ag I don't have any money in the account. But, I mean, I don't know why you want to just base so much on other people. I don't really care what other people say. I can tell you this.
I'm saying
you ride with Errol Spence. I think Errol Spence is really good too. But I'll ride with Deontay Wilder. It's not that good. And at some point, when he fights Anthony Joshua, if he gets to that point, he's going to get his ass starched.
I would take him over Joshua today. But he would be an underdog. He would be an underdog. And the odds makers have him an underdog against Joshua, theoretically, if they were to fight today. But the odds makers have Wilder as less of an underdog than any other heavyweight in the world. So
I don't know why it matters, other than the fact that mybookie.ag from time to time gives us money. All right, we're going to wrap it up. And 18 minutes ago, I told you to keep to a minute, and you had to bring Deontay Wilder up, didn't you, John?
Yeah, I don't know how he got in there, but he got in there somehow.
It was you. It was your final statement.
I was the odds. That's right. I put the odds. I just mentioned the odds on the fight.
You can't say Wilder or Joshua on this show with me and you on it. You know that. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I want to remind everybody, tomorrow night after the Indiana-Purdue game, you can catch the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show with myself and former 1981 national champion Steve Risley. Super Bowl week this week. We'll start off on the Grueling Truth Monday night with former New England Patriot fullback on the starter. He was a starter on Super Bowl 36 where they upset the Rams. Mark Edwards was also a legend at Norwood High School in Cincinnati, and then a legend at Notre Dame also. Played for a decade in the NFL. Great fullback. I think he made a Pro Bowl once. We'll be talking to him about Bill Belichick, how Belichick prepares for his Super Bowl, and talk a lot about that Super Bowl 36 game. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this show up since it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and remind you that you can hear everything on iHeart, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you hear sports podcast, you'll hear the Grueling Truth. So for John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to the Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.